Okay.
Hi there, I'm Jeff Tingley, writer and artist at Rare Earth Comics. And with me today, I have Rare Earth Comics art director, David Robles.
Hi.
How you doing, Dave?
Not too bad, Jeff. Yeah. Thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day and hosting this so that we have a opportunity to chat and
Yeah,
go
I
over
mean,
go over some stuff.
I've talked to on a couple of these, but I've yet to host one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they thought it would be really good to have one of the artists talk to the art director and make sure you
Yeah.
get your spotlight.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah.
Uh, in part because you were with Rare Earth Comics long before I was. And
Yeah.
I'm referred to as one of the old school guys. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Old school. Yeah. Yeah.
so how did you meet Ian, and how did Rare Earth Comics get started?
So back when I was about 14 years old, a good friend of mine, Tony Negron, had gotten a quick little gig working for a small section in the Hartford Current local newspaper called Metro Bridge, and he was doing a comic strip in there called Metro. And he, told the people over there, "Hey, listen, you should invite one of my buddies to do a strip as well. He's young. Tony was a little older than I was, but I really think it'd be good to give him his first shot." And he got me in and showed him up to that point, what I've been doing. And I don't know if that I'd ever done much sequential work, but they gave me a shot, and so I started printing there, and that was it was a fun experience. And then when that ended the following year, a lot of kids from all over Hartford had seen the stuff that we've been doing and really
Mhm.
wanted their shot at it. And, dozens and dozens of adolescents from all over the city had shown up from all the different, high schools and said, like, I want to do the same thing that these guys are doing, but there weren't many spots. And so, Tony and I continue to do work as well as a couple other people, but for everybody else, like, what do we do? And so that's kind of where like I really started as far as drawing comics and stuff like that. But as far as meeting Ian, that stuff had been kind of going on. So a couple of the other teens in the Greater Hartford area had known about myself and Tony from that.
Yeah.
And so Joe Young, who's a local cartoonist, was holding a workshop, and at that workshop, were other aspiring artists and writers. And so Tony and I had a couple of years in our belt, and our buddy Merton. And so we were going there looking for the people who were, we wanted to collaborate with or write stories with. And so there were some really good artists there. Audwin Newman and like I said, Joe Young and a couple
Mhm.
other people. I mean, Audwin was working doing stuff for DC and working with Bart Sears and everything, and it was um, it was cool. And so then over comes this guy to our table, and he looked like he was damn near 40, but it was a 30-year-old Ian. And
Did he have the full beard even then?
he had the full beard. There's probably some gray in it then too. The long hair, trench coat, and he comes over and with his little swagger, and he's like, "Yeah, I write stories and stuff like that." And we're like, "Cool, cool, cool. We publish stuff with the Harvard Current. You might have heard of us." It was just this adolescent, just kind of bravado. And
Yeah.
so we met him, and he threw some ideas at us. And we're like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." And we showed him some work, and he liked it. And so we all got together and we decided to kind of start, writing and drawing together. And Ian came, with a whole different kind of perspective on things. Tony, Merton and I, we'd, kind of grown up in Hartford, and we had, this kind of like urban feel to a lot of our stuff. Our exposure to comics had been a lot of the mainstream stuff. I mean, my earliest, experience of comics was, the Jim Lees, the Mark Silvestris, the Rick Leonardis, a lot of those guys of that early
That
90s
like
era, of course.
Marvel new breed there.
Absolutely, the McFarlanes, and all the guys who would eventually form Image. You know, of course, Eric Larson was, at the time probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite artists. I
Nice.
loved how dynamic he was, how expressive he was, and his run on Spider-Man was just next level for me. And so, it was. then Ian comes with his different approach, and he was all Vertigo and DC and dark and like alternate and stuff. And he grew up reading a whole different kind of stuff, and so he brought this other kind of more y- you know I- just a whole different vibe and a whole different perspective. And so we became this kind of combination of, like you said, like new breed, but like this new age kind of more next level of thinking in comics and storytelling. um,
Hmm.
and we just started coming up with some great ideas, and it was a great kind of relationship from the beginning, and I really vibed with Ian on a lot of stuff. So that's kind of where we met, just a bunch of young teenagers just thinking we were the next big thing.
So then reaching back, I want to hear real quick. What comic did you do for the Hartford Courage?
It was called the Bridge Files. It was oh man, it's almost embarrassing thinking back on it. But so it was this character. I was like 14 years old, so it was all tropes. But like this guy, so we wanted obviously Metro Bridge, and so the Bridge stood for Bionic Responsive Independent Defensive Genetic Entities. Like I don't even know how I came up with that, and it's nonsense, utter nonsense. But it was this guy who'd been like taken in by like the government and like turned into this like bionic soldier, and he kills his brother in like the third strip, and then he like
A,
he
a,
like
a little bit dark for a newspaper.
that's always been me though. That's always been me. I don't even know how they let me publish this stuff. It literally, like, he blows a hole in his brother like with like this optic blast. But anyway, like, yeah,
Was this like 4 panels a day?
and so actually we published it. It was monthly or sometimes more. And at first it was like one strip, like a half a page, and then eventually they let us get like full page. And
Okay,
so sometimes I would do 4 panels. Sometimes it'd be like 8, 10 panels. But
right.
you
But
know
you had a full page to play with.
but we would have a full page to play with, and it was fun, man. It was absolute fun. And so the from an early age, I learned to have to try to condense as much story in as few panels as possible. So it was a great kind of learning experience, because I didn't really have much time to waste, because if it's another couple weeks before the next one comes out, you know you really don't have much time, and you have to tell stories so quickly. So the Bridge Files lasted, I think, a year before I transitioned into a different character, because like all, like, Tony, myself, Merton, we all decided, hey, listen, let's all overlap our characters and have this like story arc where we're all a big team. And so then we became it became the Bridge Files, and all of our characters like joined in, and like I created a new character called Dark Shadow. It's spelled Darque, of course, because
Right.
everything 90s had to be misspelled or have blood in it. Um, but yeah, so it was a ton of fun, man. But I it would have been nice if it had come out more regularly, but it was a special that allowed teenagers in Hartford to work. And we went in there and we wrote our own stories. We drew our own stuff. We went into the Hartford Current, worked with editors and everything else. We were down there piecing stuff together. Kids who were into photography took their own pictures. People who were into Kids who were into journalism wrote their own stories. And I remember like being in some other articles in there. One was about playing video games, because arcades were pretty hot back in the 90s. And damn, I came off as really cocky in one of those stories too. But just think back on it, I think it was pretty much a jerk when I was a teenager. But yeah, it was a fun time, man. Fun time. A lot of learning.
And I find it funny, like repeatedly hearing about how cocky you were,
Yeah.
because you are one of the most humble people I know.
Yeah, that's because you have a lot of gut checks over the years. Thinking back, I think one of the first like big gut checks was in high school. Like I was voted class artist, and there were other artists in school. But as far as like drawing, like illustrations and comic kind of style, I mean, it was really Tony and myself at the
Hmm.
time at Hartford High. And so like I developed this ego, and then I go to college, and I remember like I was enrolled in social work classes because I just got some advice, that just to work on art, but to have a different major, or whatever. So anyway, so I go to the art studio because I said, listen, I don't want to take like basic drawing classes and like I had a big ego. I was like, I got this. I want to jump right to like figure drawing and do all those things. And so like they're like, listen, just go talk to the guy who heads up the art department, Professor Worley, just one of the most amazing artists I've ever met. And so I was like, all right, yeah, I'll bring my portfolio, I'll show him. And I remember walking into the figure drawing class and seeing the like walking out, oh, I just want to talk to the teacher when he gets a moment, and seeing the work that these people were doing. I mean, we had, grown people, we had professors, art professors who were retired, who were just taking the figure drawing classes just to kind of stay sharp. And I looked at their work and I immediately just wanted to run out of the classroom in embarrassment at the
Yeah.
fact that I had the audacity to walk into that room with like this chip on my shoulder, and I was embarrassed to open up my portfolio. But I'll tell you what, like Professor Worley said, listen, I'll let you audit the class, but I still want you to take the basic drawing courses and everything. And I was like, oh, absolutely. After seeing the work, I was like, no, 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 you're right. I need to. And taking the figure drawing classes, and I was blown
Was that
away.
like one of the charcoal ones?
Oh, like they worked in other like, dude. There was like one lady who would come in every class. She was does something different. One time she came with a little pot of ink and branches that she'd collected from her yard, and she would dip the branches, and she was drawing with these branches dipped in ink. And I'm like, what the? And like we had like people who were former Disney animators in the
Yeah.
class and everything else, and a guy who was a friend of Professor Worley's who was an art teacher somewhere else. And so like, and he's drawing in different kinds of medium that I never even played with. But yeah, I got to be exposed to all these different things, and I started playing around with charcoal and different stuff because seeing the stuff they did. But I remember they would look at my work, and I would be embarrassed, and they would be like, dude, like this is some good stuff. And I'm like, you like my work? And they're like, yeah. And they looked at my sketchbook, and they're like, what reference did you use for this? I'm like, well, I didn't use any reference because in comics you don't have the generally the liberty of having a figure drawing model for every pose, and so you just have to come up with it off the top of your head. And they're like, I can't do that, I need a model. And I'm like, you do? And they're like, I couldn't do that. And so suddenly like their their humility and how humble they were and how embracing they were of me, kind of changed my whole attitude about stuff. And so no matter how good I think I am, I never, really come off that way. But as good as I think I might be, I always know that I'm nowhere near as good as a lot of other people. But I think that was the first time that it really hit me, and I really needed that moment, honestly.
Right. And one of the great things I find about art when you're like, oh, not as good as or whatever, like style plays a huge part into it.
Yeah.
And you will find the artist that you think is the top artist at the game. And they'll point to somebody else with a completely different style and be like, oh, but I wish I was them.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Always. Always. I mean, I follow a lot of artists on Instagram and stuff like that, and they're constantly like giving feedback or comments on other artists' pages, and it's just mind blowing how like just you said, like I look at this guy, I'm like, oh my god, he's at the top of his game, and he's turning around, and he's going, oh man, I can't believe this guy draws like that, and I'm like, you're envying this guy, but I have you looked at your own stuff? But that's just it. Like if you think that you're done growing as an artist, then it's time for you to hang up your pencil. It's you're always growing and getting better.
Now, you mentioned the current was your first time doing sequential art.
Yeah.
Did you always want to do comics?
I thinking back, like I always liked art. I think my earliest art influence was my older sister. She's about 10 years older than I am, and so she
Mhm.
was, when she was in high school, I was like, 6, 7, 8 years old, and she was into art, and she'd bring home paintings and drawings, and I was blown away by her work. And then she went to college, and she would, still draw and paint. At this point, I'm like 8, 9 years old, and I'm like, oh man, and so she, when I'm coloring in my Smurf coloring book, she's still, no, 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 you gotta stay in the line, do this, do that. And so she would give me tips, and she'd get me like watercolor sets and different things like that, and let me play around on a canvas when I was a kid. And she'd really always encourage me to continue drawing. um, I first got exposed to comic book art when I was doing a typical little brother thing, because my older brother was about 9 years older than I am. So I was
Hmm.
snooping around in his room. I was like, I don't know, maybe 8, 9 years old, and he's like 17. I'm in his closet snooping around. There's a lot of bad stuff I could have found in there, but luckily I only found comics, and old wrestling magazines, but
Right.
I found comics, and I'm like, what's this? And dude, like I spent like a day. It was just nonstop reading. Like some of them didn't even have covers or were missing pages, but the work blew me away. I remember reading old Ghost Rider and Justice Society and JLA's, Fantastic Fours and Spider-Man, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so that at about 9 years old or so was my first exposure to comics, and I was like, I need more of this stuff. And I'd go to local like drugstore and pick up a Archie comic or anything that I can get my hands on when it came to that. And at 11 years old, when I was in middle school, a friend of mine, Raheem, was like, "Oh, you're into comics? Let me school you." And he gave me a couple of trade paperbacks of X-Men, like the Dark Phoenix saga, and I was like,
Right.
what is this? And it blew me away. And that's when I was like, this is what I want to do right here. And I would mimic drawings and I would copy stuff and I want to come up with my own characters. Um, but the first moment that I knew that like I think like I could do this was again with my sister. And we were stuck at a parking lot. She had an old crappy car, and we had gone to a store. I remember picking up a box of fiddle faddle, and we got in the car and her car wouldn't turn on. So she's like, oh, sometimes you just got to give it a while. So we're sitting in the car, we have to turn on. I'm just eating the fiddle faddle, and in there was a Marvel trading card, and I took it out, and I remember the drawing of Wolverine was pretty crappy. um, and I looked at it and I was like, oh man. I looked at my sister and I was like, I was probably about maybe like 12, maybe 13 at the most. And I said to her, I said, you see this? And I said, I could do better than this, pretty soon. I'm going to be better than this. And I said, one of these days I'm going to be doing this right here. I'm going to be putting, I'm making trading cards and drawing comics. And she could have totally been like, I'm sure you will, or like, absolutely. But she turned to me just straight face and said, I know. And like that confidence, and that reaction to me still gives me chills. The fact that there wasn't a question in her mind that I would be doing this. She knew. She knew. And she's like, I know. And that gave me kind of, another boost. And it made me feel like this is legit. I could do this, that somebody would be that confident that I could do it and wasn't gonna go ahead and just gonna give me the usual, like, oh, I'm sure you will. So yeah, I mean, like I knew probably from about 11, 12 years old that that I wanted to publish comics and draw comics.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that sounds pretty incredible. I also like hearing in that story, like that you would like probably open the old pages and like copy them down.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
that's original as well.
Yeah. I remember seeing a Jim Lee uh, like uh, first page of something that he'd drawn, and I copied the Wolverine like as
Yeah.
as best as I could. And I remember showing my brother, check out what I drew. And man, my siblings used to keep me in check. My brother said to me, yeah, you didn't draw that. I was like, yes, I did. He goes, you copied that. I was like, well, I mean, like somebody else drew it, and then like I drew it. And he's like, yeah, you didn't draw that. Somebody else drew that. You copied it. Give me something you drew. And I was like, okay, I'll come up with something. And I remember I came up with Centipede Man, and it was a guy, and he had a bunch of little arms. And I go back and show him, and he's like, dude, this is crap. You got to keep trying. And I was like, I will, and like I needed to show him, that I could, and I kept drawing. I don't remember what I came up with next, but and that's one of the things that like that stuck with me was like you can look at something and you can reference it, but don't copy it. Make it your own. Take what you will from somebody as far as how dynamic they are, or maybe how they render shadows or what it is, but it's got to be your own. Otherwise, it's not really you. What you put down on paper is just somebody else's. And so I took a lot of life lessons from my siblings early on.
Awesome. Uh, so a question I get asked a lot.
Yeah.
and I don't know how to answer it. So I'm gonna pass it out to you.
Great.
You
No
get a
pressure.
script. You get a script. You
Yeah.
read the description. You know how many panels the page is.
Yep.
How do you then visualize that onto the page to start drawing it?
So I guess it depends on who writes it. I'm used to drawing a lot of stuff that Ian's
Right.
written.
You've worked a lot with
Um,
Ian.
I have worked a lot with Ian over the years. I mean, I've written some of my own stuff, and I've drawn some stuff that other people have written or some generic scripts. But I think when I get a script from Ian, um, I kind of sit there and close my eyes and see what his words are kind of telling. So if he's telling me, three-quarter bird's eye view of our protagonist standing over a defeated villain as he holds, his sword in his left hand
Right.
and blah blah blah. And so like automatically like I make myself like a camera, kind of floating around the space and seeing this and reading it. And sometimes I may take something that Ian writes and flip the camera angle a bit. I may zoom in some more. Generally, he and I have a really good vibe, but I just kind of imagine myself like this floating camera. Like if you have it on a like on some little plane just kind of flying around
Hmm.
and visualizing it. um I'm a very visual person. I've always loved animation. Animation was, as at a very early age, something that was very important for me. So growing up in the 80s with a lot of the cartoons, the from Transformers to He-Man, Thundercats, Silverhawks, all the other
Oh
you
yeah.
know um, great cartoons, I think were a big influence on me too. But that was an early influence on me before comics for art. So watching Robotech and Tranzor Z and Voltron and all these, you know and then early on a lot of the anime, from Katsushiro Otomo's, Akira, to all the other things. I mean, I think were a big influence before like I even started reading comics regularly. And so I think that kind of cinematic thought process is my default before even like thinking of it as a
Right.
comic in a panel.
So you almost see that whole scene, that whole page is like just one scene moving, and
And
then break it down.
absolutely, I'm on a page on Facebook where like there's a lot of different artists, a lot of up and coming artists, young artists, and experienced artists, and we give each other feedback and stuff. This one guy was coming up with a pose, and he's like, what about this? And I was like, and I could immediately tell, I was like, well, you got to think through the whole action. What is the point of what he's doing? This whole action needs a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you just got to pick a pose somewhere in that process. So again, going back to what you said, so even if like Ian says, in the panel description, the hero standing over the defeated villain, I'm not visualizing that snapshot. I'm visualizing the moments leading up to that moment and then afterwards, and kind of picking where in that process, where in that transition, I want to snap a picture. What's going to be most dynamic, what's going to tell the best story, and that may be from that three-quarter bird's eye view that he mentioned, but it may be from more of a worm's eye view because that tells a better story, or is more dynamic. And so again, it's that kind of thinking through the whole moment or the whole scene and that whole action, and picking the best, what in my opinion is the best moment in that scene to tell the story.
So you almost are like a director.
Yeah, yeah. And Ian himself being, having a film background and being a director himself, writes his
Right.
stories, and so the way that I think lends itself to the way he writes.
Are you in the middle of a project now?
So I'm in the middle of relaunching something. So Ian and I, one of our big projects was Shadow Tracers. It wasn't the first project from Rare Earth Comics. I mean, we'd done some books, before that. We'd done Rare Earth Chronicles, and I did some stuff in Rare Earth Chronicles. We'd done Channel Guard, and then our first, foray into full color and into like um, everything was shadow tracers, and that was something that was really near and dear to us. And we did about um, I was into the fourth issue of a 5 issue miniseries before kind of life got the better of us, and we never got to finish that. And we had a lot of people that were really into it, and a lot of people that really enjoyed the book. And there was something about it that we always wanted to finish. Unfortunately, there were, it's been going on 10 years removed from that last issue. So we said, I don't want to just suddenly jump back
Right.
in,
And,
being at different
just
stages.
to fill in people who might not know, during that time, Dave was going to school and he is now a registered nurse
Yeah. Yeah.
and he is a father.
Yeah. Being a nurse, and having that as a main career, and advancing through my nursing career, and like you said, now being a father to two amazing kids. So yeah, life hit me hard pretty quick. Went from zero to twins. Um, that changed things a lot. But yeah, and so all along though, I've maintained a presence in rare earth, and tried to kind of just really cheer people along from the sidelines, and mentor wherever possible, and give feedback and everything else. But now that the kids are getting a little bit older, and now that we've really gotten this itch for Shadow Tracers back, we're hoping to relaunch it and tell it as a graphic novel. And so just kind of one story. So we're retelling the story, staying true to the roots, um, in our concept, but redoing that. So that's kind of
So
what Ian and I are working on.
quick elevator pitch
Yeah.
then.
So the elevator pitch for Shadow Tracers, which I was never the best at, Ian has it like he can do it in his sleep, as
Yes.
you know. But it's essentially a group of kids stumble onto the schemes of a criminal syndicate, and gain superpowers, and before long, they're trying to find a way to balance, uh, saving the world, and doing their homework. As Ian likes to say, we tackle the age-old problem of how do you fight crime when you aren't even old enough to have a driver's license.
Yeah. There's a
And
very specific type of comic that is a teen
yeah,
superhero.
yeah,
And
yeah,
even more so when you get into a team element.
yeah. And so we wanted to keep that kind of vibe. And so about a group of kids in way over their head, gaining superpowers, and and somehow finding some way to save the day. We grew up, like I mentioned before, on the cartoons, but we also grew up on some of the best movies, talking about Goonies, and Back to the Future, Karate Kid, Ghostbusters, and we wanted to capture some of that fun, some of that innocence, and definitely Goonies plays a big role in it, in the personalities and stuff. And so
Mhm.
for me, it was always kind of Goonies meets X-Men. And so that's always the way I kind of envisioned it. And so that's kind of where we're going, and just reimagining it for you know uh, 2020, as opposed to early 2000s.
Nice. Uh, is there anything in this book upcoming that you look forward to drawing? You're like, that is my jam.
I look forward to just drawing um, action scenes. I totally enjoy action scenes. If you have an opportunity to speaking of the people viewing this, to read any of the early Shadow Tracers, I mean, I think my most fun drawing Nightfall's fight scenes. There's one scene I remember where he's fighting the syndicate agents for one of the first times, and he runs off to the rooftop because he hears like this beeping, and he finds like some little like device, like a listening device, and he's like, what's this? And immediately, like almost like spider sense, he realizes something is up, and he turns around just in time to snatch like a tranquilizer dart out of the air, and he's like, wow, I didn't even know I could do that. and out of nowhere come all these syndicate agents, and he jumps behind a a dumpster, and he's like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, what's going on? And then he just hits like autopilot mode, and he throws on his mask, and he just jumps out from behind the dumpster, and he just goes to town on these agents. And at one point he does this like kind of backflip, and I just remember drawing it. It's like one of my proudest moments in drawing it, where like the time kind of slows down. It's almost like a Michael Bay thing where like time starts to slow down really quick. And so this kid is just discovering this like acrobatic skill that he somehow acquired. And he's doing this backflip, and he's almost like in that first Spider-Man movie where he's like, look at this. And he's upside down, face to face with the syndicate agent who's looking at him like, what the heck is going on? But by the time he realizes what's going on, the kid is behind him, and he's just, kicked him with both feet in the back. And like, it just scenes like that are what I'm looking forward to drawing again. Just these fun action scenes where like, just capturing, you know, dynamic, you know, poses and drama with the innocence of like, holy crap, look what I can do. So that's in a nutshell kind of what I'm looking forward to.
Fantastic. Do you have any last words for anybody? We're finishing up Comic-Con at home,
Yeah.
but we're going to keep moving on with art.
Yeah, I think this has been a lot of fun, and no one knows what the future holds with what's going on. But one thing that I think we can all turn to kind of give us an escape from all of this is comics. I think it's a means to kind of um, express ourselves and to lose ourselves, and it's the thing that's always been great about storytelling and stories is the ability to, even when things get grim or dark or serious or stressful, just losing yourself in another world, even for a little while. And so at Rare Earth Comics we really want to be able to provide that kind of just escapism, while telling a lot of fun stories, while telling a lot of good, solid stories with beautiful art. And so I hope to soon be delivering some more of that with the reimagined, relaunched Shadow Tracers. I know you're doing it with Heretic Hacks, and Carl with Falling Awake, and Dr. Lannis, and Jen and Leia with Dungeon Minis and Beelzebub and all the other stuff. So we're just doing a bunch of fun stuff over here at Rare Earth Comics, and hoping people at home can really lose yourselves and just kind of have fun with us in this.
Well said, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you for everybody for joining us for Comic-Con at home, and our first panel season, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.